Aaron, are you there? Can I hear you? I can't hear anything from you. Have you been disconnected? Uh, you seem to have lost your picture and nothing happening here. Uh, I'm going to try and reconnect again. I'll try and reconnect again. Let's try again. So we're trying, but there's a problem. Don't know what to do. The program's not working, obviously. Seems like we're trying, but
Can you see me now?
okay, here we go.
Are we back now?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
I have no idea. I can still hear you and see you throughout.
Oh, you
but
could. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're a little fuzzy in terms of your image here on this side, just so you know.
Yeah, my picture's clear on my side, but I have the same issue. So your picture's fuzzy on this side, but the actual recording. So live, they'll probably see this quality of picture, which is not the best. However, when it's recorded, the recorded version is a lot higher quality.
Okay.
It gets converted.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, sorry about that. That's a bit of a
No problem.
rude interruption, but I'll cut it out of the main podcast and I'll merge them together so it's smooth.
Sure, no problem there.
Okay. Right. So we were talking about immigration, I believe, and the fact that employers have to apply
Right.
to get people who are potentially, and put a case forward for people if they're not qualified or if they have a specific skill for a job, and that can take some time for people to get in. Yeah. Is that the kind of people that you generally tend to help, Andy? Is that kind of...
Yes, we're more in the area of business immigration. So, for example, managers, executives moving over, intercorporate transferees. A typical one might be a person works as a manager for, I don't know what, say, well, a bank, say Bank of Montreal, which is a Canadian bank, has a branch in London, and there's a manager of that branch, and he's transferred back to, let's say, Montreal from London. So now he is not a Canadian citizen; he's a UK citizen. So he's transferred over on an intercorporate transferee visa, and the rules that visa, intercorporate transferee, is pretty much prevalent all over the world with countries. And the basic gist there is if you've worked for 1 year overseas as a manager and you're going to work for the same company or a subsidiary or affiliate of that company here, then you can be transferred. You get a work permit, and you can work in, let's say, Canada or the United States, doing that. So
Are they relatively straightforward, those ones,
yes,
or are they quite
yeah,
difficult? Okay.
yeah. So if you're a manager or executive, or even if you're a person with specialized knowledge, you can get across, you know, to the United States or Canada as an intercorporate transferee. And then there are, you know, like the IT industry, people who are skilled in IT. There are all kinds of visas available for people like that. You know, there's an agreement between the United States, Canada, and, you know, UK and others, um, where people of that caliber, highly educated, skilled individuals can transfer over and come and work temporarily, or later apply for permanent residence. Right now, um, let's put it this way. Uh, if you don't have family in, let's say you're interested in moving to the United States or Canada, if you don't have family that can sponsor you, you're most likely going to be looking for either an investor option where you put up money. And generally speaking, I would say, like just as a rough number, if you have 350,000 US dollars, you can find a way to immigrate, to invest. Or you're skilled, highly skilled, meaning um, professional, for example, architect, engineer, lawyer, doctor, you know, any of those kind of professions. And in the medical field, all kind, you know, therapist, psychologist, doctor, nurse, all these kind of, those areas are all good areas to immigrate with. You'll have a good chance, and that area requires a work permit. But if you're in that area, getting a work permit is not that difficult. So that's the way
Okay.
to go on that.
Okay. So doing a little bit of research on yourself, Andy, you've done a lot of columns in Forbes and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that all been about immigration, or has it been about other areas of life as well?
Well, I've written. I was a UN correspondent before I was a Forbes correspondent for 3 years in New York. So I wrote, like more broadly in Forbes. I have to write about immigration. That's they call that the swim lane. That's where I have the most expertise that they want. At the UN, I wrote about broader issues. So I drew you into one issue at the beginning of this broadcast, the Ukraine-Russia war. But I wrote, for example, on the law of the sea, habitat, women's issues, human rights issues. All those kind of issues are issues that I've written about.
Okay. So how long did you do that for with Forbes? Was that a regular thing, or was it?
Well, it's been 10 years. I cannot believe that it's 10 years. And if you told my English professor in English 101 at university that I am going to be a Forbes writer, that guy would roll over in his grave, because I barely made it through English 101. He took pity on me at the end and just gave me a 50% mark just to get me over the pass line, so I could, because he knew if I don't pass English, I'm cooked. I can't continue on in university. And so, somehow I made it from there to writing for Forbes and at the United Nations. And I guess the way I did it was, if you want to get good at anything, what you got to do is just keep doing it and improve yourself. So over the years, I started, I was writing. At first, I was pathetic. I truly was. I was pathetic. But over time, I started getting a little better. And now I'm not too bad. Grammarly tells me I'm in the higher ends of, using words and, the way I write. So I hope that's true.
Yeah, that's a beautiful tool in it, Grammarly. It really helps.
Oh, God. I use it all the time.
Yeah, but how did you find it? How have you found developing that writing skill? Then has that been something? Did you get a lot of feedback on it as you started, or was it just something that you just worked on yourself?
Well, I'll tell you that story. That's a good theme to touch on in my life. I thought that I'm a good communicator, especially verbal presentation skills. And so I attended Toastmasters. Toastmasters is an organization that cultivates public speaking skills.
Yeah,
And
we have them in the UK. I've considered going myself, but I've never actually plucked up the courage to do it. To be honest.
okay, so I joined and I attended Toastmasters meetings every week for 35 years, club meetings, where we would sit down, someone would get up, give a presentation, and then we would give feedback. You should stop, you know, sort of wandering around on your feet. Stop using the word like all the time. Look into the eyes of the people you're talking to. Don't mumble. Speak clearly. Things like that.
This
And I,
feels very very pointed at me, Andy. Here.
oh boy, you have a bit of comedy in you. You could be a stand-up. I did some stand-up comedy. We could talk about that. But anyway, so I spent a long time thinking, hey, I'm a great speaker. Just above me here, you can see there's a little plaque that I got, and it's called the Distinguished Toastmasters plaque. I rose to the top of the Toastmasters organization, being a distinguished Toastmaster, and there are 330,000 Toastmasters worldwide. But only 1% of those Toastmasters, 1%, are distinguished Toastmasters. And I got into that category. It took me 35 years. Now, some of these guys who are Toastmasters, it takes them like half a year and they're distinguished Toastmasters. So, but there's all kinds. There are really good ones and ones that are not so good. But anyway, but the world wasn't responding to my speaking skills. Like they would invite me occasionally. I'd be paid for speaking and so on, but there was no way I could make any career out of it. The money wasn't there for me to launch into a speaking career. It just the world didn't want me there. But for some reason, my writing, even though it was pathetic in the beginning, started picking up ground. Like I write articles, and I'd write about things that really concerned me, matters, immigration. I mentioned Ukraine and what was going on there, and things like, that the cultural, there's multiculturalism in Canada was a topic that I was interested in, and so on. So I wrote articles about that, and in time, people were responding. They said, "Yeah, you're making some good points. Yeah, you're doing." And before I knew it, I was writing for newspapers. I wrote I was a freelancer for a group called Southern News Services, which had a number of newspapers across Canada. So I did some work for them, and I wrote articles. I wrote articles in Ukrainian because I could write Ukrainian for Ukrainian papers and so on. And it sort of started taking off, and soon enough, people were reading, and I got paid for writing articles. And eventually, to come to Forbes, after 3 years of working in the UN, I left New York. I came to Canada, to Toronto, and I was writing articles about immigration. And someone from Forbes figured out, well, who is this guy? Like let's look him up. We looked him up, or they did. Oh, the guy worked at the UN. Well, let's ask him if he wanted. He's U.S. and Canadian immigration lawyer. Let's ask him if he wants to write about immigration. So they called me. First time in my life. All my life, it's been when I applied for anything. I'm too fat. I'm too tall. I am too thin. I am too small. I'm too stupid. I'm too educated. I'm not educated enough. I should have come last week because it's all over. Come next week because it'll be open again. Always no. No matter what, it was always no. One time in my life, the Forbes sent me an email. Hey, would you like to write a few articles for us in immigration? Would I? Oh, of course I would. And that was 10 years ago. And here I am 10 years later, still writing for them.
What do you put it down to then, Andy? That obviously you did all the speaking and going to Toastmasters and stuff, and the speaking didn't quite turn out for you, but then the writing did. So what do you put that down to? Is that just your passion came out in the writing, and it was maybe a bit more raw and a bit, what people wanted? Is it? Do you think that's probably what it was?
Something that's really a great question. I think what happened is I was looking for and searching for my unique ability. And I believe everybody has a unique ability. Like if you want to put it out on a scale, on the one side you're incompetent, then there are things you're competent on, and then there are things that you're really good on, and then there's a unique ability, and it's a bell curve. And so you look at that side of the bell curve where unique ability is. There's a couple of things you may be uniquely able to do that nobody else can do as well as you can. And I search for my unique ability. Now, I still believe my unique ability is communication. Like of anything I can do, I am the best at communication. And this meeting here right now, this discussion right now, is a affirmation in my life of my love for communication and talking and connecting with other people like you and me right now. So if you work in your unique ability, which you have to struggle to find, it doesn't hit you over the head with a sledgehammer. You got to figure it out. How do you figure it out? Well, you ask yourself, what do you like to do? What do you like doing that when you do it, time passes and you don't even notice how much time goes by? What would you do even if you're not paid to do it like what we're doing right now? I'm not paid by you to be here. I'm doing it for free. And so I don't know, probably you are too.
Yeah, same, yeah.
So this is telling me, listen, we're going to spend an hour together, whatever it is, and it's going to go like that for me. And I know sometimes I get chills down my body when I'm working in my unique ability, or creepy crawlies go down my arm. It's intoxicating, or it can be intoxicating, because you're rising to the best that you can be when you're in your unique ability. So I've hammered all over the place, trying to find a nail that will that works. And finally I realized, hey, this is it. This is the place. Now I haven't given up on public speaking. I still, but I've realized this area, like that, what we're doing on right here, is almost perfect for me because, well, in this case, I don't have to go somewhere to 2,000 miles to attend a meeting and stand in front of a group of people. You can connect online, but I can share my ideas and learn from people like you. So that all came to me. It kind of came naturally to me after I focused in on, and in my law practice. Listen, if you ask me, what do I do day by day, all right, when I'm not on a podcast? If you looked at me, I had a camera sitting here in my office recording what I do. It looks kind of dull. I answer the phone. I type on the computer. I fill in forms. I talk to people that come in and out of my office. I write letters, emails. It's kind of boring. That stuff is not really, you think, oh, immigration lawyer and all that. But I asked myself, hey, Andy, okay, there's stuff here that's not the greatest, but there's some stuff here you like. So what do you like of what you're doing? And I realized, hey, if I can use my communication skills in this field, I could do a lot of good work. And I'll find people who can fill in forms or answer the phone or whatever to take that part. If you give me the communication part and dealing with client part of the, I'll be really good at it. And I am. I would say I'm pretty good at it, really good at it. But I had to focus on that area of this larger area. And it takes you down to a friend of mine is a nuclear physicist, and he teaches nuclear physics. Well, he used to. He's retired now. He taught nuclear physics at York University. And I was talking to him. I said, his name is Yuri. Yuri, how can you know nuclear physics? I mean, that's so I can't imagine how you could even, learn that. Like, he says, hang on. I focused on a little area of nuclear physics, and I became really good at it. You know, I studied that little area, and I became an expert in that area. So much so that people come to talk to me about that area. That's a priceless insight. You know, focus on one little thing in your life that you love and become the best you could be in that one little thing. Like, I think this area is for you. There's something in this area we're dealing with here. Is that one little area for you? And if you focus on that one little area, within 5 years, you can become a world expert in that area. The best, one of the best in the world, if not the best. If you spend every day focused on that area, because not everybody's going to be doing that. And it's your unique ability. So there's no competition. There's nobody competing with you out there.
Yeah.
So that's the way to go, I would say.
Yeah, I really enjoy doing this. I enjoy speaking to lots of different people, and I'm quite curious, so I quite like to know how people's minds work and what they do and stuff like that. So, yeah, I really enjoy it. It's just something I really enjoy, and I'm going to continue to do it. So we'll see how that pans out. But as far as you've found your communication is the one. How has your communication style had to differ then from between obviously your legal practice, your journalism essentially, and then obviously writing books as well? How have you had to kind of taper and adapt your style to meet those different needs?
Well, I put it this way. I would draw this analogy. You go downtown, say London. There are various restaurants, and they're all serving food. One's Italian, one's Greek, whatever. Uh, so uh, they're all engaged in the area of serving food, but each one has his or her sort of way of doing it. And the same is true in my communication area or in my field. I have my way. It may not be suitable for everybody, but it's my way that I deliver it to the world. And it will be different than you or anybody else. And it'll be different because my upbringing and my education and my experiences are different than yours. So, what I have to offer you is going to be different than what you have to offer me. And that will color your communication style. So you can probably hear in what I am saying that I have a slight tinge of an accent in English. I have this Eastern European Ukrainian accent, even though I was born in Canada, raised in Canada. You know, never like I've visited Ukraine, but I've never lived there. But I have that little tinge. That's a little example of what affects my style compared to other people in terms of how they express themselves. Um, but uh, how this sort of flows over from immigration to journalism to writing books. Um, the theme that I'm addressing will influence how I present things. But my background influences how I address each theme. So, for example, because I'm of an immigrant background, I'm not an immigrant, but my parents were. And there's a long story there. That story influenced me, and it it's something I honor. I have deep respect for the immigrant experience. Um, so when I write, I infuse my writing with what I know about the immigrant experience, and it tailors the objectives of what I write about, because it's a strength for me, because it's I come from that area, and I can share the experiences of my family and others who I've worked with others who maybe have never had anything to do with immigrants. Um, so so I'm working in, again, a field that I have a strength in. I try to work from my strengths. And in my books, in my articles, I'm writing about the immigrant journey or immigration as a subject. In my books, it's a immigrant journey, a cultural integration, rising in a world that is competitive, and trying to show yourself in that world, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you lean on a lot of your personal experience for that kind of stuff as well? Because obviously you've experienced it. Obviously you didn't immigrate yourself, but your parents did. So you've experienced it through them and through your childhood being that first generation.
Yeah.
Since moving to the country, yeah. How has that impacted
I
everything
I
that you?
I am able to empathize with people who are going through the immigrant experience, much more so than someone who's never dealt with people like that. And I share my experience in Toastmasters has led me to become, I believe, a good storyteller. One of the things in the entertainment industry is you got to know how to tell a story. Um, so I think I've become a pretty good storyteller. And if you read my books, by the way, they're all available on Amazon if you want, or Barnes and Noble if you want to find.
What I'll do at the end, I'll get all the details and I'll pop the links in the show notes for you. All right.
Yeah. So my books are full of stories. I think people relate well to stories. I myself, I don't like dry presentations on, things that don't have a sense of a coherent narrative with a moral, what's the moral to the story kind of a structure. But if I were to go to a school and talk to people, I believe I should talk. I believe you should talk from your experiences. I believe people want to know about you as a human being. What you know, the great speakers in the world, the people that I've listened to, I have attended speeches of some of the greatest speakers in the world, guys like Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn. I mean, there's a ton of them. I mean, there's no end of speakers, and the great communicators. They're all storytellers. They know how to tell good stories, and you learn from them that most people, like the people listening to this podcast right now, one of the things they're interested in is, well, that's all very, they're thinking, well, that's all very nice for you, but what can you do for me in my life? How can I improve my life, my circumstances? What can you share with me to make my life better? That's a really important lesson, important goal to strive to achieve in communicating with people. Now,
Yeah.
in the immigration field, my mission purpose is helping clients improve their lives through immigration. And I tell this story to the people who work for me. I think it's a good story. I'll share it with you. You might have heard it. Three men are working on a brick wall. You go up to the first guy and say, "What are you doing?" The guy says, "I'm making 10 quid an hour." Go to the second guy, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm building a wall." You go to the third guy, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm building a cathedral." All doing the same thing, but the attitude that they're bringing to their work makes the big difference. Yesterday, I told that story to a young student here in my office, and I converted it into immigration. Here's what I said. I said, three people working in immigration. First guy, you go to him and you say, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm making $10 an hour," because we're in Canada, $10 an hour. All right, second guy, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm filling in forms." Go to the third guy, "What are you doing?" "I'm helping people improve their lives forever through immigration." Same attitude, but different results. I think it's really important what attitude you bring to what you're doing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it's having that bigger picture, isn't it? And uh, understanding what you're trying to do, not just getting caught up in the little tiny details of, "Oh, I'm just bored doing this."
You mentioned something that's critically important in my life. There's a guy named Bob Richards who is a Toastmaster, and he won an award. It's called the Golden Gavel Award for the best speaker, of the year. And he told a story about motivation, and I was very struck by this story, which I heard from him, recorded from his talk, and it was that he talked about a period of time economically when life was difficult, and the economy wasn't going so well, and so some leaders went to economists and said, "What do we need to change things, to turn things around?" And they answered, "Motivation. More than anything, we need motivation." And then he went on to talk about motivation. And he said, in his case, when he was a small kid, he loved baseball. And he attended at the local baseball field where they had a semi professional group of sports baseball players. And there was a guy there named Lou Boudreau, who was the great star of the team, local team. Lou Boudreau later went on to play for I think the St. Louis Cardinals, one of the professional teams in the United States, as a second baseman, I think. But at any rate, back then he was the star of this local team. And that day, Lou Boudreau hit a home run, and this guy Bob Richards was a little kid, and he was at the far end of the field, and he got the ball. So he took the ball and he went to the players' locker room, waiting outside as the players are coming out for Lou Boudreau to come out. And he related the experience that Lou came out and there were a bunch of kids asking for his autograph. And he waited in line, and then finally he came to Richards and he says, "Oh, what's your name?" as he's signing the baseball. And he says, "Bobby." "Oh, Bobby Richards." "Oh, okay, Bobby. I can see one day you're going to be someone really great, Robbie, or Bobby, sorry. Really great. One day you're going to be really great." And Richards related how that comment from an idol like that was so stirring to him. It motivated him so much that he, shared it in his speaking career. And he described what is motivating about it. And what is motivating is motivation is painting a larger picture of the life that the person you're talking to has, painting it for him or her. And the moment of motivation is when that listener latches onto that bigger picture for their life. That was, his summary of motivation. To me, it was like a game changer in my life. I realized, wow, like that's, you know, I can't think of much more of value to know about than how he painted motivation, how he portrayed motivation. And I live by that. I try to do that with people I work with.
Yeah, it's important. It's very, very, very important, especially if you manage staff or anything like that. If you're in a leadership position, um, you have a responsibility to kind of lift people up and and I think it's very easy when you're a staff member when you're working somewhere to just be focused in on what you're doing. And as a leader, it's your job to lift their head up and so they look up and out and see actually this is what we're doing. That's just a small part of this, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
Um, and I think that's very important. And I think a lot of leaders fall short on that part. Unfortunately, a lot of my experiences where I've worked and stuff like that has been poor, where people are just micromanage, get you to do this, get you to do that, without actually getting you to buy into the bigger cause and what we're trying to actually achieve.
The vision, yeah.
Yeah.
Vision.
And I think all the best companies and all the more successful companies are really, really good at selling that vision and getting people to believe in what they're doing essentially. And it's massive. So, and that story really, really ties in well to that. Really ties in well. Storytelling. So obviously you discussed how important it is, and I couldn't agree more. I think all the best speakers tell stories. I think I'm not a religious person, but the reason the Bible is still appeals to people as well and gets people in is because it's a book of stories. It's not telling you have to do this, you have to do this. It's stories that relay something that you can relate to, and and there's messages behind it essentially.
Right.
So how did you develop that ability to tell stories? Is that something you've had to work on, or is that something that comes naturally to you, or is that
Well, let me tell you a story, and then I'll illustrate
okay?
how it came to be. Okay. I was practicing law in Los Angeles, and it was a weekend, and my wife was not around then on that weekend. And I was at the office on Saturday, and around 5 o'clock, I thought, well, okay, I gotta pack it in. I gotta just. What am I gonna do tonight? And I thought, I'll go and see a film. And I lived in Pasadena, which is a little community just north of Los Angeles. So I drove over to Pasadena to the movie theater, and I looked, and there were a couple of films. They had like 5 or 6 films, and I chose one, and I saw it started. I think it was at 7:30, but it was only at like around 6:15 at that time. So I thought I have to wait till 7:30. I'm kind of tired. I think I'll just drive over to the park nearby and take a nap for an hour or whatever, for a little while. So I drove over to the Pasadena area. It's where the Rose Bowl is in Pasadena, and I parked near the tennis courts, and I put my seat back. I was thinking, okay, I'll get some rest. I'm trying to get some rest. But there were some kids playing around in the area, making a racket of all kinds, and cars going by back and forth. And I couldn't fall asleep. I was, these things were bugging me. So I think, heck. I turned the car on, and I think, I got to drive somewhere where there's not so much traffic and people around. I'm looking around, and I see that under the big bridge that crossed over a river there, and where the road went, there was an area that was kind of isolated, not many people there, just under the bridge. And I thought, oh, I'll go park over there and I'll rest there. So I drove into this area, this isolated area. There were a few cars. It was a unpaved kind of parking area with a few cars, maybe two, three cars in it. And I turned the car around so I could see like the exit kind of thing. And it was a gate that was open. It was fenced. The area was fenced in, but the gate was open. And so I kind of leaned back, I put my seat back and I kind of fell asleep. And oh, it's maybe about 40 minutes later, I woke up and I looked up and oh my gosh, the gate had been closed. The gate was closed in front of my car and locked. And it's, one of these metal gates, right? And it's locked. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get out of here? And I looked around, and it was quite a large field, like a soccer field or a football field area, and a couple of cars, as I mentioned. And I'm thinking, oh, there's got to be another gate. So I turned on the car, and I drove the car around the perimeter of the field. There was no other gate. I was caught. This fence went all the way around the field, and in one area there was a building. And it was, the fenced-in area was connected to the building. But the building was closed. There was nobody there. So I drove back to the gate, and I'm thinking, how the heck am I going to get out of here? So I think, I'll start beeping my horn. Maybe someone from the area will hear me and figure out, oh, this guy's stuck. I'll go, maybe they have the key to the gate. So I started beating my horn. And I was thinking in the building behind that there were some lights in that building up on the second floor, that maybe someone up there would hear me beeping and figure out, hey, this guy's stuck. So I'm sitting beeping, but I'm thinking, I can't beep too much because there are all these people living in houses nearby. I don't want to cause them too much trouble. So I did intermittent beeping, beep, beep, beep. For a few minutes, I'm doing this and I'm thinking, who am I fooling? This isn't going to work. This is crazy. I got to get out of here some other way. So I think, well, there's a fence and it's got barbed wire on top of it. So I don't know. But there's got to be someone in that building back there because there's lights in there. If I go over the building to the front door, which is on the other side of the building, I can knock on the door, get the guy out, and he'll come and help me get the car out. So, but I'm thinking, no, I have to climb over this fence. So at first I tried to climb the fence and I realized, no, the barbed wire it's too high. And I'm in a good pair of pants and a nice shirt, like this kind of shirt. So I'm thinking, it's too high. I can't climb over like that. I know what I'll do. I'll drive the car over near the fence and I'll get up on the car and jump over the fence. And so that's what I did. I jumped over the fence. By now it's getting dark outside. It's not totally dark, but it's getting dark. And I'm walking down the street, going over to the building, and I'm looking for people who might be in the houses to think maybe there's someone there I can go and say, hey, listen, can you help me? I'm stuck here. But I'm scared to, it's because it's getting dark and it's sort of a side street. These people might get scared if I come and just knock on the door. They think I'm some kind of I don't know what, a lunatic or something going door to door. So I'm trying to figure out maybe there's someone I could see that's there so I can just talk to them kind of thing. Nobody there. All the doors are closed. Lights are on, but everybody's inside having a good time. They don't think about me. So I'm driving, I walk down the street, I go to the other side of the building. And I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be a door here. So I go, and sure enough, there's a door. So I go to the door and I knock on the door, violently on the door, hoping someone can hear me. Nothing. Nobody's answering. I'm thinking, maybe there's second floor, they can't hear me. Is there a button here? Maybe there's a bell I could push. I'm looking around, no bell. I can't find a bell. Nothing. I can't find anything. I'm frustrated. I'm thinking to myself, you're stupid. Like, well, how could you get stuck in a car, falling asleep? what kind of person are you? Then I'm thinking, I'm not stupid. It's just that could happen to anybody. I'm thinking, well, what do I do? Well, what are you going to do? What are you supposed to do? And I'm thinking, call the police, call someone. How am I going to call someone? There was no cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone. How am I going to call someone? Well, go find someone. Find someone who's got a cell phone. I don't want them to think I'm some kind of lunatic. Oh, don't be embarrassed. It can happen to anybody. Just do it. These are my thoughts through my head. I look around. Sure enough, behind me, across the street from the building, there's a guy on a porch, sort of, and he's there working on a computer. And I said, so I go walking towards him. Now he's got the lights on. It's dark now. And I kind of walk up to him and I say, "Excuse me, sir." He said, "Yes." I said, "I'm stuck. My car's in the parking lot of this building. I'm trying to find someone who can, open the door for me or open the gate." He says, "Well, did you try pushing the bell?" I says, "What bell? There's no bell." He says, "Take a look. There's a bell there." So I look around. Now I'm farther from the building, and I look around, and there's this huge arrow painted on the building, pointing to a bell, like huge, like the arrow is probably 3 feet high, and it's about 10 feet wide, and it's an arrow pointing to the bell for the building. So I go, I'll try it. So I go over there, push the bell. Sure enough, you can hear, it's ringing inside. Again, again, nobody coming. So I go back to the guy. I said, "Listen, I'm sorry, but it's not working." He says, "Yeah, it's an army building. This is an army facility, and they do exercises here and stuff like that. But it's the weekend. It's Saturday. There's nobody here. There's nobody going to come here. You're not going to find it." I says, "Well, can I use your phone? I'll try and call the army." He said, "Okay, sure." So I phoned the army. Somehow I found whatever the number was. I phoned the army. They said, "Well, sorry, we're closed. You have to come back on Monday." Monday, yeah. "I can't come tomorrow." "No, there's not going to be anybody here tomorrow." I said, "Okay." So I decided, well, I'm going to go home. Called a taxi, got in a taxi, drove home. On Monday, I came back in the morning. The gate was open, got in the car and drove off. Now there's a story. That's a story. Now the story is, it's a narrative, just a bunch of thoughts coming along in an organized manner, hopefully with some lesson to be learned from it. Don't get caught in a parking lot sleeping. I don't know, it's a basic one. Or be good to yourself. Sometimes you got to make a mistake and you just have to live through it. And you look like an idiot, but that's life. Those are the kind of morals I take from that story. Now, how did I learn to tell that story? How did I know that was a story, or that it would mean something to people? Well, first of all, I think it does mean something to people. I think people can relate. One of the things that's valuable about that story is it shows I'm human. That I'm like you and everybody else. We all make mistakes. We all go through hell sometimes, caused by ourselves. You can't blame anyone else. You got to blame yourself. And when you're in that situation, you got to think, "Oh, why did I do that?" Right?
Yeah, we all have situations like that, don't we, or along them lines. And I think it's powerful to actually own it and show that vulnerability, that actually we all make silly mistakes and we all get caught out with stuff. And I think it enables people to bond with us a bit more.
Yeah. So there's an emotional component. I think you have to touch people at an emotional level, and stories have a psychological element to them too. You touch people, it's heart to heart. You touch someone at the heart level, but also at a kind of a spiritual level, if you believe in spirits. I do. That it's a communion of people. It's you. Uh, the highest level of communication is a sort of a communion where you feel the same way. You consider what's happening here. Um, I made a bunch of noises that my vocal cords helped by uh, exhaling air that my vocal cords caused my vocal cords to vibrate, which made a sound that came across this technology to you and to your ears, and your ears converted that sound through your brain into meaning, right? But not only meaning, it converted it into feelings, amazing feelings. I can share what I feel to you through this method that we have to communicate with one another. It's a miracle. That's storytelling.
Yeah, we take that for granted as well, because when you're saying that, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
But we just take it for granted, don't we? It's so much that we don't even think about how amazing it is. I mean, you're over the other side of the ocean, and we've never met in person yet. We're able to communicate in a way that I can understand you. I can take it in. When you're telling something such as a story as well, I can like almost put myself in that position, where I'm thinking, that could happen to me. It could be something I do. I've done similar silly things and stuff, and I can imagine how you were feeling, how it was, and stuff like that. And we just take that for granted so much, but yeah, so powerful.
Yeah,
so powerful. But what advice would you give then to people who are aspiring? Well, let's say communicators. So, it might be writing, it might be, becoming a better speaker or storyteller. What advice would you give to people that wanted to improve that area?
Okay. Well, the advice is not as profound as you might expect. And that is, if you want to be a good chef, cook. If you want to be a good singer, sing. If you want to be a good communicator, well, if it's verbal, talk. If you want to be a good writer, write. There's nothing that can replace repetitive work, provided like it's not repetition leads to perfection. It's perfect repetition. Repetition leads to perfection, meaning you have to learn while you're going along. And the way to learn is to study the craft or area that you're interested in. So if I want to be a good tennis player, I don't only play tennis, but I read books on tennis and I watch who the best tennis players are and how they play. And I adopt their styles. I try to learn from how they do it to become the best tennis player. It's the same in the area of communication. I've watched the best speakers and I've learned from those speakers how they make the best, tell the best stories. And I try to adopt my style to what their style is, adapt, I guess, and be better because I'm doing better because they're doing better than what I'm doing. So that's what I would, and go back to this unique ability. Focus on your area of unique talent, whatever you find it to be, and search for it, and focus on that area and learn everything you can about that area until you're the best in the world, and you can't be.
I like that project. I can relate to that a lot. So I'm bumbling through my podcast experience, and as I do it, I'm trying to just I call it marginal gains, something I stole from
It's good.
a professional cycling team. But what I try to do is just if I can be 1% better every single time,
Yeah.
be it me personally or be it my equipment or anything, if I could just make that 1% improvement every time I do a show, then over the period of time, that's going to escalate and snowball and get me to where I want to be, essentially.
Yes.
So, it's that repetition and doing as many reps as you can, but also they need to be purposeful. They need to be, trying to go to the next level and not just be happy with, where you are, essentially.
Yeah.
So I can really buy into that. Really buy into that. So how do you then balance sort of leading other people and continuing to grow yourself? How do you manage, like, sort of not putting all your efforts into growing other people, still trying to grow yourself? How do you get that kind of balance?
Okay. Well, there's a method that I use, and I'll just briefly go through it with you. I ask myself, what are my values? What do I care about most? Now, values are all about subjective things, meaning what's of value to me. And what's of value to me may be different than what's of value to you. Now, you can talk about values such as health, wealth, family, God, things of that nature. Or you can talk about value in terms of things like integrity, honesty, sincerity, love, whatever, those kind of things. But whatever the values you identify that you think are important for you in your life. So in my case, what I would put down is, my family is valuable. I value my family. My career is valuable. My contributions to my community is valuable. Uh, my health is valuable. God is valuable to me, and so on. So, having identified my key values, then I'll ask myself on a scale from 1 to 10, like, what I'm going to do is put these values out on spokes, like coming on a bicycle from the center outward. And let's just take one value. Let's say God is an important thing or person in your life, and you feel that there's something you should do about that. So just as a spoke, one spoke might be measured just like by the edge of a picture, of your picture here on the screen, that one spoke going up. At the bottom, that could be level 0, and at the top could be level 10. And you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10. So 10 is doing everything you can possibly do on that value to satisfy you for what you should be doing on that value. Another one might be health. From 0 to 10, you measure how healthy are you and where do you put yourself. Now, in my case, for example, on 10, let's say on health, I'm not going to put myself at 0. I think I'm doing better than 0. I think I'm doing better than, say, 5. Now, when I start climbing up higher, that's when I'm not doing so. So let's say I'm a 7. I think I'm at about a 7 in terms of that value. I'll go on to the next value. Family. How much am I doing with my family? Again, from 1 to 10, and maybe I'm at 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever, etc. Now, what you do is you take these spokes and put them in the form of a circle, like a bike. Having measure yourself out on each value, and then connect the measurements in a circle. So, for example, health might be at 7, family might be at 8, God may be at 6, whatever it is, the other one's 5 or 7 or 9 or whatever, and you draw a circle. That's a visual a representation of someone who is in perfect balance. Few of us are. But if you look at that circle and it's a flat tire, meaning you're neglecting some of these values that you consider to be very important in your life, then you're out of balance. So, an example of being out of balance in my life can be sometimes I'm so committed to my work that I'm here too late and I'm here on weekends. So, my family is suffering and I personally am suffering, attention to me. And I'm not paying attention to health and, maybe diet and so on, or whatever you put on your circle. So now you got to smarten up. Now, at times you have to be out of out of balance. For example, the students here who are writing the bar exams, for a time, everything else doesn't count. The bar have to prepare for the bar, and you'll spend a couple of months out of balance, studying all the time, eating lousy meals, pizza and I don't know, hamburgers for a month or two. That's okay if you are committed to some great purpose that you want to sacrifice yourself for to achieve, so long as you go back into balance. But if you're someone like Van Gogh, who was deeply committed to painting, he spent his whole life painting and he painted masterpieces. He was a genius in art, but his life was totally out of balance. If it wasn't for his brother, he wouldn't have survived. Like he had nothing, like basically his brother supported him. And you got to wonder whether, is that what you want to do with your life? Maybe if you're Van Gogh, you want to do that. But if you're not Van Gogh, maybe you want to be more balanced. So that's the way I deal with balance.
Yeah, I like that. I think balance is crucial personally. And everybody's balance, like you say, is different. It's personal to them. I think what's right for them and what makes them feel at peace. Really, I'd call it feeling that state where they have been at peace, where they're happy with where everything's at, or happy maybe not, but just happy that everything is kind of flowing the best it can. I think that's really, really crucially important for people. So, yeah, my balance is always out of whack. I'm terrible. I tend to make triangles out of that circle constantly, and then just try and find my way. But very, very rarely find my way back to the circle. But
it's easy
I think
to preach. It's hard to do.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult, and yeah. I'm terrible for it, to be honest. Terrible, but what can you do? What can you do? I own it, so it's who I am. But so you've had an interesting journey, Andy. We've discussed lots of your journey and your professional career and stuff. What's been the standout thing, the thing that probably you're most proud of throughout your career and or life, maybe?
Well, I'll tell you, and it won't be what you think you might be expecting. My mother was reaching an elderly age in her late 80s, going into her 90s, and her sister, my aunt, Ellen, who I mentioned earlier, who lived in Los Angeles, was also reaching older life. And I had a period of time in my life where I had to look after these two elderly ladies because they essentially raised me. Between the two of them, they raised me. I mentioned earlier that I had spent half my life in the United States, the other half in Canada, and I used to go back and forth. I went, for example, high school. I went to high school in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Edmonton and so on. Well, in the early part of my life, that's no problem. I mean, they're they're older and they looked after me and so on. But as they got older and older and my father died and my aunt's husband died, they were in their reaching 90 and so on their own in their places of residence, getting old, and nobody to look after them. I was the only person who was in their life to look after them. And I spent, now my wife was with me, so she helped me. But I spent about 5 years of my life out of balance, in crisis, going back and forth from Edmonton to Los Angeles, looking after these two elderly people. And the way things work when you're elderly is you want to stay in your home and you don't want anybody to bother you and you're happy with your life. But you think you can look after yourself and it turns out you can't. And the time comes when you have to do something. Now, I said to myself, I'll never push anybody into a senior's home. No, that's not for me. No, they don't want to go into a senior's home. So I'm going to respect their wishes and I'm going to talk to them reasonably. And, well, over time, things started falling apart. They got ill and dementia came in. And I came to the view, I saw that they need to go to seniors' homes. And so now getting these people, my aunt in particular, Aunt Helen, into a senior's home was a challenge. There's no way she's going to a senior's home. No way. And I remember this one day, I said, look, okay, I know, I got it. You don't want to go. But I just want you to try for one day, see what it's like. Just one day. And if you don't like it, you come home. Okay, for one day. This took like a few months to get her to come for one day. She went for one day. So she's there, and I've left, and I'm coming back to visit her. And I come to her room, and she's got a room, and she's got a bed, and she's in the bed, and it looks like she's asleep. And so I tiptoe up to the bed. I'm standing next to her. She's sleeping in the bed, and I'm standing looking down at her, thinking, is she sleeping or is she awake? I don't know. And then all of a sudden, she gets up, grabs me by my shirt. She says, Andy, get me out of here. Get me out of here. Okay. Okay. Experiences like that, And then I would go away because I was flying. I had to look after my mother and my aunt. I come back and I see she's black and blue. She fell and hit her head on a coffee table. She was out cold and came to on her own. And a neighbor came by and helped her to get up. And, black and blue, like a huge blue, scar. And Helen, Teta, I called her Teta in Ukrainian. You can't live like this. You have to go. You can't be by yourself. Well, and I arranged caregivers for them, to come in and be with them. 24-hour caregiving at home. Cost a fortune. But we did it. But that wasn't going to last long. What happened when the caregiver got sick or couldn't come or took a vacation? Who looked after her? It just was not the only thing was to go. There's a place called, I don't know if I can even remember the name. Anyway, it's a senior's home in Los Angeles, a Catholic place. There's some brothers who looked after elderly people. And I remember going there. This is a place I took my aunt for a day, and she said, I want to get me out of here. Took her back. By then, she'd kind of settled in. Okay, I know this place. Something of God. I forgot the first name, but something of God. And downtown Los Angeles. And so I took her there. And I remember the monk, he was a priest actually, but a monk. And he's saying to me, he says, yeah, in our order, we believe that suffering is part of life and that, we help people suffer and live through hardships. I thought, wow, like who wants to dedicate themselves to hardship, but anyway, here's the story that comes out of this, okay? I promised my aunt I promised her, if you die, so help me God, I will be there when you breathe your last breath. So help me God, I will do that. If you go to that nursing home. Okay. She went to the nursing home. And she would, she was on a ventilator. It was like she's 95. She's on a ventilator. Like that, for a day, for a week, for 2 weeks, for 5 weeks. And it's around Christmas time. And I got this problem. I got my aunt who's in a senior's home on a ventilator, and I got my mother who's in a senior's home up in Edmonton, not quite on a ventilator, but also, and it's Christmas time, and I got a family, like I had 2 children, my wife. So I checked with the people at the nursing home. I says, look, I'm going up to Edmonton. You got my number. If there's any problem, please give me a call. Do you think it'll be okay? He said, oh, don't worry about it. She'll be fine. She'll be fine. Got on the plane, flew up to Edmonton. It's Christmas, just after Christmas. I get a call from Los Angeles. It's a doctor. He says, she's on the last stretch. You got to be here soon. I said, I'll be right there. He says, okay, come. I arranged flights. Big storm, huge snowstorm. Can't get any flights down. So through Seattle, I got to fly through Seattle. There's a flight to Seattle, but I can't fly directly to California from Edmonton. Edmonton's on the west side of Canada. I take the flight, if there's a green door, I believe take the door. If there's a green light, take the gray, whatever you have. If it goes forward, take it. So I did. I went to Seattle. I'm in Seattle. She's dying. I'm trying to get the flight down to Seattle. I talked to the airline. There's one last flight to Los Angeles tonight at 11:30 or something like that. You get on it. You'll be on it. I got on it. I flew down. I show up, in Los Angeles about 1 or 2 in the morning. I figure now if she's like she was when I left, she's still on the ventilator and so on. I'll take a couple hours rest and then took a couple hours rest, went to the nursing home. She's there on the ventilator. Okay. I sit next to her, hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. She's on the vent. Nothing's happening. I says, to the staff, we don't know, could take weeks, who knows? I think to myself, there's an end to this story. I'm almost there. I think to myself, well, since I'm in Los Angeles and I have a law office in Los Angeles, I'll just drop in, pick up my mail, and then come back. Just because I want to, I had a lot of mail that had been away for 2 weeks. So I got in the car, drove to the office. I'm looking through my mail, get a phone call at the office. Your aunt has passed away. Get in the car, drive to the nursing home. I try to arrange for a priest to come to say last rites. No priest. I go to the nursing home. You got a priest around here? Yeah, there's some guy who's Irish, a priest. We'll get him. The priest came over. I couldn't come to the bed. I touch her. Her body's still warm. She's dead, but the body's still warm. He said the Our Father. But this is what he said. He said, I'm going to say the priest that Jesus Christ himself taught us to say, Our Father who art in heaven, etc. Very moving. I didn't know that. But, I put her away. Like we buried her at the funeral. A few years later, my mother, same thing. But I didn't miss her. I made a point of not missing it. Don't miss it. I didn't miss her death. I was there when she breathed her last breath. And that last breath is a titanic struggle between life and death. I watched it myself. Titanic struggle. They breathe. And then they give in finally. and all you can do is pray for them.
Yeah, that's
Tough times.
I appreciate you sharing that, Andy. That must be a difficult short story to share. I have had an experience of that myself with my grandmother. I was at her deathbed when she took her last breath, so it is a very powerful moment, isn't it? It's a difficult moment, but
Mother
equally,
Mother Teresa led her life. Her belief was that nobody should die alone, and her big power was in her touch. The way she touched a person. And she was beside people when they died. Honorable calling.
Yeah, I think it's yeah. I mean, I'm a bit lost for words, to be honest, Andy, because it's such a powerful story. But the importance of being there for people in that moment, I think, is massive. And we're not all fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do it, and to be there. But I think that's just shows true love, and being there at the end for the people we care about. And I think it's really important if we get the opportunity to do it that we do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, appreciate that. That's such a powerful story. I'm a bit reluctant to move on from it, to be honest, but because it's really moved me, and I can see that obviously it still means so much to you as well.
It does.
But we're going to move from the past into the future. What's the future like for Andy?
Well, as you know, I've written a couple of books, and I'm promoting one book. It's called Salomia, Star of Opera's Golden Age, and it's a story about my great aunt who was the world's leading soprano in the golden age of opera in the first decade of the 1900s. That book relates a story about her contribution to the opera Madame Butterfly, making it a success worldwide. And perhaps this would be a good story to kind of finish our meeting with. So if you'll allow me, I'd like to tell that story.
Absolutely.
Puccini, who was one of the world's great composers, had a winning streak for quite a while, and he was looking for a new opera to write. And he didn't have anything, immediately available. So he took a trip to London. And in London, there was a play that was put on called Butterfly. And it was the story of a Japanese geisha girl who fell in love with an American naval officer who had come to Japan in the 1800s to open up Japan, because Japan up until that time had been a closed society. But the American Navy came in and they opened up Japan to become a modern state. And she was in Nagasaki, and a geisha girl, which is someone who entertained women. I'm sorry, not women, men, in geisha clubs, etc. So the story is that they develop a romantic relationship, and Pinkerton, the American naval officer, actually goes through a form of a marriage ceremony with this girl whose name is Chiyo-Chiyo-san, which is Japanese for butterfly, Chiyo-Chiyo-san. And she's just a teenager. And they sleep together, and then he announces to her, look, I'm being called to go back to America, so I'm going to have to leave you. And she's traumatized that he's going to be leaving, but he says, don't worry, I'll come back for you. And she said, well, okay. So he leaves, and she waits for him, pining for his return. But it takes years and years before he returns. He only returns something like 5 years later. But in the meantime, unknown to him, Chiyo Chiyo's son gives birth to his son, was pregnant and gave birth to his son and raises his son. So when he returns to Japan, Pinkerton learns of the boy, and a crisis develops. And the crisis is, who is this boy going to live with? Is he going to continue and grow up with the geisha girl? Or is he going to go with his father back to America and with the father's new wife? And they discuss it and decide it's best for the boy to go back to America. And in one of the final scenes of that opera, Chiyo Chiyo's son draws her boy off to the side and says this to him. She says, "Look at this face. It's the face of your mother. Remember it. You will never see it again." And following that, she gives the son off to Pinkerton, who takes him off to America while she commits suicide. That's the end of the story of the Madame Butterfly opera. So this story, the play was staged in London, and Puccini fell in love with it and insisted to the playwright that he give him the rights to stage this opera. And Puccini, like the guy wrote about Puccini, meeting Puccini, he says, what do you do when a hot-blooded Italian grabs you by the neck and says, give me your play, the rights to your play. You have to give up the rights. And he gave up the rights. And Puccini then took the rights, went to Milan in Italy to stage the opera at La Scala, the premier opera stage in the world. And to play the roles, he hired two of the top people who were in opera at that time, a lady named Rosina Storchio, who was a soprano, and a guy named Zanatello, who was a tenor, and a few other top names. And they rehearsed, and they were going to put the opera on La Scala stage in 1904. Well, Puccini was so confident of the success of his opera that, unlike in all other operas that he ever staged, he decided to invite his son and his sister to the premiere of the opera. And when the premiere came that night, they were in the audience, and Puccini was, for some reason, very nervous, very, concerned about the success of the opera, so much so that he's smoking away, on the stage in the side. And he's talking to the performers, and they're all nervous. And even like Storchio wrote in her memoirs that she was very nervous about something was just not working that night. So that when they staged the opera, when they performed, the audience started booing in the middle of the opera, whistling and hissing, shouting out, La Bohème, La Bohème, as if this opera was repeating some of the stuff from the other opera, La Bohème. And to the point where by the end of the opera, they were just crestfallen by the fact that it was booed out. The next day in the papers, all the newspaper headlines, Puccini fails, opera, disaster, and so on. And Puccini is just crestfallen. He doesn't know what to do. And he figures, well, he'll go to his friend, Arturo Toscanini, who was a great director at that time, to seek advice. And Toscanini said, there's only one person who can help you save this opera, and her name is Solomia Krushelnitska, who was my great aunt. Now, at that time, Solomia had already been a star in the opera world. She was at the top of her career. And being asked by Puccini to take on this role and try and restage this opera would be something like asking, say, Julia Roberts to take on a role that Sandra Bullock had in a major movie that was a flop and try and redo the movie and make it a success. I mean, it was a huge risk to her, her stature. But because she was friends with the two, Puccini and Arthur Toscanini, she agreed to do it. And so the two of them in 1904 went to Brescia, Italy, which is about 100 miles east of Milan, and at the Teatro Grande prepared this opera. Puccini rewrote it with her help. They restaged it. She wore a Japanese outfit for 3 months, solid 3 months, in order to get herself into the role of Chiyo Chiyo-san, because she was something like 30 years old at the time and she had to play a teenager. So it was kind of risky. But at any rate, they restaged the opera. And on the opening of that newly staged opera, they were all nervous. Again, Puccini was, chain smoking on the side of the theater stage. The audience was even nervous. Everybody was nervous, thinking, was this thing going to make it or not? But they staged the opera. And as the opera went on, Salomia captivated the fascination of the audience. She had a very beautiful voice, a beautiful, melodious voice. So much so that they started applauding and started asking for the actors to restage parts of the opera, like instant replay. They sing an aria and they loved it so much they wanted so they had to re-sing the same aria again. So, and they loved it so much that by the end of the opera, the audience gave them a standing ovation, 7 standing ovations, including pulling Puccini out behind the curtains to take a bow because of the appreciation of the audience. And the opera went on with Salomia playing Chiyo Chiyo-san for 100 times throughout Europe, until on the 100th occasion, when she was finished, she gave the score back to Puccini, saying, "That's it. This is the last time I will perform the opera." But at the opera, that was 120 years ago this year. This is the 120th anniversary of the opera Madame Butterfly. And it's one of the top operas beloved in the world. It's one of the top 5 operas of the world, even to this day. So there's a story for you, Bob, from the book Salomia, Star of Opera's Golden Age. And it's not a book about opera so much as it is about human achievement, to do the best you can do in your area that you have chosen as your calling, and breaking the ceiling, the ice, the floor, the ceiling for women, trying to make it in a man's world, and about integration, being an outsider, getting accepted in a world where you're normally not accepted. Anyway, that's a story from that book.
That's brilliant. Where can people find you, Andy, if they want to find out a bit more or get in touch with you?
Well, I work at Pace Law Firm, so pacelawfirm.com. You can reach me there. I have a website called myworkvisa.com, where my books are all listed if you wanted to find out what books I've written and look into them a little bit. And that basically through Pace Law Firm, they can reach me.
No problem at all. Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Really, really appreciate you sharing some stuff that's really, really close to your heart as well. I really, really appreciate it. And can't thank you enough for your time.
It was a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much. All the best.